Hi, my name's Tim, and today I'm going to be taking you through the process of shooting star trails as well as editing the pictures to get that awesome effect that we're all looking for. So what will you need? Well, you're going to need a camera that has a manual or shutter priority mode because we're going to be doing long exposures that require you to manually switch your camera settings. What you're also going to need is a tripod to keep the camera stable because your hands cannot keep the camera that stable. A remote shutter release would be nice, not necessary. Tape will suffice. I'll show you later on in the video how to do that. What's also very nice is a lamp to show you the camera, illuminate the controls on it. So without further ado, let me pull out the cameras and start showing you how to do this. Here I am with about a little bit above standard point and shoot camera. So what you want to do on this camera and cameras like these, you want to put the camera itself into drive mode, as they call it, or continuous shooting. Here this camera, for example, has 2 frames per second, so I'll set on 2 frames per second in manual mode, and then I would set the exposure, which we'll talk about later, and I would put something here. I can't find the usual small marble I put, and I tape it down so it presses and holds and keeps the shutter going the whole time through, and it'll keep burst shooting until A, it runs out of battery, memory, or it has a limit itself. Make sure even when you're shooting a camera like this, you shoot RAW, and if you don't want to shoot RAW, when you put it into JPEG, turn the JPEG, make sure you take multiple test shots with different white balances, because in JPEG you cannot change that later, and the white balance you need to be right, because sometimes, as here when I live in the suburbs, you get a nasty city light haze, which is not good, and white balance lets you eliminate that, or at least make it not look that bad. There is one more way to shoot with one of these cameras, but that requires you to stay out here with the camera and keep pressing the shutter. That is to set in all your exposure settings, and as I'm doing right now, put in a 2-second timer, then press the photo, let the 2-second timer go, wait for it to take, and once again take another. This will reduce the camera shake that you put as you press the shutter and touch it. As you see, this tripod isn't exactly sturdy, that one's much better, but it'll lower the camera shake, creating those nice star trails we want. But the only issue, another issue with that is you have to stay out here and you have to keep resetting the 2-second timer. I had to click it again in order for it to stay present. But that's a way of doing it. If you can't tape down the shutter because you have a weird shutter or you just can't do it, that just requires you to stay out here for about an hour. Here's the last camera I'm going to talk about. It's a DSLR, and it's really high quality, and it's good to shoot star trails with. Key things to remember with the DSLR. Here, this will come with your camera. It's a back cover to cover the viewfinder, so no stray light comes in from your headlamp, or your house, and any other light sources that could be bothering in the image and create excess light that's not necessary. This camera has an interval time shooter, so I'm going to talk about that as the last way of shooting. This interval time shooter I set for 1 more second than my exposure. So for example, if my exposure is 20 seconds, I'll set the interval timer for 21 seconds. So therefore it shoots an image every 21 seconds, which gives it 1 second to about get back together and shoot the next image and prepare, which is good because this isn't exactly the most expensive one. Another key part to remember with a DSLR is to turn off the image review, because that will eat up your battery and it will slow down the interval timer. That is very important. Of course, shoot RAW so we can post-process, but if you don't shoot RAW, make sure you establish that best white balance for the night sky, whether there's plenty to choose from, and see which one works best to find the best image. So now let's talk about proper exposure. Okay, so when setting the proper exposure for a star trail shot, you want to use an exposure that's about, I want to say, as you can see me, I'm adjusting the shutter speed here, between 20 and 30 seconds, so 20 right there. An aperture at night, as you can see, I'm still greatly overexposed, but at night it's much darker, so I'm going to be able to use probably my lowest aperture, which is 3.5 on this lens, and that will allow me to shoot that long exposure. That'll give me a little bit of star trail, and then when I put them all together in Photoshop, I'll get the full deal. If that doesn't work, if it's too dark, you can adjust the ISO, raising the sensitivity of the sensor itself to get a higher exposure, but that's not necessary usually for this camera or if it's too light, you can adjust the aperture and make it smaller to let in less light, which will help. Key thing to remember when shooting star trails is you want to manually focus on something. As you can see here, I'm really overexposed, but manually focusing with the ring on the camera lens or electronically, depending on your camera, which is key thing to remember. Okay, now let's go take a look at those images I shot last night, and let me show you how to edit them. Here we are getting ready to edit the images that we took during the night, or I took actually, and I have those images right here in my folder, and I'm gonna go ahead and open up Lightroom to put these images together. So first thing I'm gonna go ahead and do is import all the images I took, so that's gonna require going and finding them. Desktop, there we go. And here are all the images I took over a period, I think, of about an hour. You can see some clouds got in there towards the end. Might have ruined it a bit, but we'll find out. Here we are, all the images are uploaded into Lightroom. And before I go into develop, I think just because of the nature of these shots here with the clouds, I might want to skip through them just to see where exactly the clouds came into play. Seems like right around here, clouds is right here on the right hand side of the image, you can see clouds. So I'm gonna try to find a spot where to cut, but not cut so much as to lose the star trails. Seems like almost everything right here is not good besides that last picture. So we can see the first cloud started peeking in right about here. Everything else looks good. There are some clouds up there. Oh, we'll see how this turns out. Might not go so well just because of the clouds. But I'm going to go ahead just to save myself processing time and in general time. I'm just going to remove these photos here that have clouds in them. So I'll give that a second. There we go. Sorry, my computer is pretty slow. I don't have that good of a computer. It's going to take a second here to load. There we go. Let's go ahead and develop these photos and make them look real good. Because sadly I shoot here in light pollution. And as you can see the light pollution right here at the bottom of the screen. Before we get into editing these images, I just wanted to point out that here are my settings. I shot at ISO 100, 200mm focal length, f3.5. Each image is 20 seconds, and every image is shot every 21 seconds, I believe. Oh, this is a test shot, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that because that's the wrong angle. All the photos have to be exactly the same in order for them to be blended. This one not the same either. Yep, okay, bye. Remove, delete from disk. These all should be the same now. Yep. Yep, they're all the same. You can even see the movement right now of the stars. This is pointed southwest. So first thing I can go ahead and do, as this is just for my camera, I enable profile correction and all of these for the images. See, it kind of brings out and gets rid of any distortion caused by my lens. And I go ahead and take that, sync it. As these sync settings apply, I'm going to take out and just sync lens correction. let that sink, so that'll get rid of any ugly distortion in my images. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, just select one image, and now this is where I begin to play around with these settings to achieve the maximum effect possible. So highlights is going to bring out the light parts, but that also shows up as a city haze then, sadly. So I'm not going to do that exactly. First I'm going to go ahead and see if temperature. I like these images to be a little bit more blue, even though it may be not exactly realistic. I kind of like to add a little bit of blue because then you can see the stars a bit better. That seems pretty good right there. So now I'm going to go ahead, this is the key I think when shooting in LightVolution, is to add a graduated filter. As you can see, I already had some settings in. These are not the settings I'm going to use, but take this off, whoops, excuse me. And this line about says where it's going to get back, kind of gradually come back to what the previous image is. So here, I'm going to go ahead and boost the highlights. And then as you can see, I'm not boosting the highlights of the city smog, I guess you could say, or light pollution, not smog, light pollution. And I'm getting a lot more star detail in the sky itself, getting more stars to make the star trails look better. And I'm going to play around with the contrast. That doesn't do what I want it to do, that just makes it awkward and unreal-like. I almost think this, without this exposure, it looks better. Let me take a look. Well, obviously just going to blow it out, but actually I believe 0.6 was probably a good compromise. I think the shadow's darker. That brings a little more. Essentially what I'm trying to do here is get as many of the stars visible as possible. Yes, that makes them brighter. But that also makes the sky seem a little too bright. It's just basically playing around with one image. Get this one image right. Come back to that. I think I'm going to make this more blue. Here on the side of blue. Come back to this graduated filter. And maybe drag the filter down a bit. Then stretch it up. Make it a little bit bigger. I'm trying to decide if this is the way I would like it to look or not. 0, and just boost the exposure to get more stars and maybe tone down the highlights. It's getting there. Getting to the point where I can see quite a few stars, more than probably I can actually see in real life. I probably do not even see this many stars in real life. I'm going to have to say that this looks pretty good. You can see already a little bit of motion and a 20-second shutter speed at my 20mm focal length. That the stars have already moved just because of the nature that this is pointed southwest. Stars move faster there. That's why the less you zoom, the easier it is, I guess you could say, to capture the star motion. Now here, if we can compare to where it was to where it is now. I've extracted a little bit more detail. That's about basically what I do to get the images to look better.
give them a more blue temperature, colder temperature, as they say, apply a graduated filter. I can still probably boost some highlights here, but as you can see, the city, excuse me, the city light pollution comes into play. Then that's why I use a graduated filter, just so I can get the sky up, essentially, and maybe whites. No, just kidding. Excuse me. Does that bring out the stars? That almost does a much better job of bringing out the stars. That looks really fake, but good work, good work. That's probably better. Yep, I would say that this is the way to go with this image, boosting the whites. So whites are basically, oops, excuse me. The whites are basically the stars. Anything that's blown out that doesn't have necessarily too much detail, that's a white in this case. Like the stars, because they're blown out, they don't have detail. And that should work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and now do as I did before. Click all the way through, shift highlight everything, and go into sync. Wait for that to pop up. Here we go. And basically touch everything that I changed. So I'm going to just go ahead and say check all. So I did graduated filters, didn't do this, didn't do any of that. But I did do the white balance. So basically here you're just looking to see what you did to make sure that it's checked. And then I go synchronize. Whoops, zoomed in, did not mean to zoom in. There's a bar telling me if it's done or not. And this computer is of course frozen. So basically it's synced. It doesn't appear in the preview until you click it. Then the image will load and all the effects will appear. There we go. And I basically just click on a few images, double check to make sure everything looks like I want it to look, that no images have any awkward kind of mess ups. Everything seems pretty good here. So now there's two ways to do this. Now I can keep all of these highlighted, and if you're really after image quality when you shoot raw, you can go here and say edit in Photoshop. It's right here, open as layers in Photoshop, and that'll keep all the raw, and it'll keep all that great data you're looking for in those photos when you merge them in Photoshop. Or you can go to export and go ahead here and export into a JPEG file and then re-import it into Photoshop. So I just exported the images into a JPEG as it loads up here. So I have all of them here as a JPEG, all of the exported images from Lightroom. So there is a free program you could use to combine these images. I think it's called Star Trails, I'm not sure, but I use Photoshop. So there's two methods to going about editing these images. The first one is go ahead and go to File, Scripts, and load files into stacks. So here I'm going to select my files from wherever I had them, my pictures, and from there on out it'll upload them. I'll do this later. Upload them here into a bunch of layers. Just they're going to be stacked one on top of the other here, as you'll see later, and that allows you to go through each image and edit out airplane trails and things of that nature. The other way to go about this is to go into File, Scripts as well, and down here in Statistics you have another option. Now this is for you people who are more hands-off and just want to put it in and be done with it, just so it puts it all together. You won't mind the airplane trails. If that's fine by you, go into here, select maximum as the choose a stacking mode, and make sure attempt to automatically align sources is not clicked. You do not want this clicked. Then you put in all the files, click them here, and press OK, and that's going to get started. But I'm going to go ahead and do this method just to show you the more complex method, where I'm going to go through and get rid of the the airplanes and the images to kind of get that cleaner cleaner look, I guess you could say, where it looks real without any interference. So I go ahead, select all the images, press OK. They should appear here at any moment. There they are. And I'm going to go ahead and import them. This will probably take about half an hour to import them. Do not click this once again. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I'll see you when this is done. So here I am in Photoshop again. I took out all these from being visible. So this eye shows you visibility, so you just scroll holding the button down and taking down all the visibility. And I go through outside of Photoshop and find which images have planes in them, and then I open those up, and I take this spot healing tool here, do content aware, and adjust the size dependent on the size of the trail here. Plane trail is pretty big here, so I'm going to use this side, and I just go ahead and go over that. And once I've highlighted the whole thing, now after that, I'm going to go ahead and just scroll through, making everything visible really quickly. Now we could have made the objects smart objects at the beginning, which would be perfectly fine, but for some reason I like doing it now at the end once I've changed all of the plane trails. For some reason that's just how I do it. So I go ahead and select all of the images by clicking shift. They'll be all highlighted. Right click on the images and go ahead and convert to smart object. So I'm going to do that, and so here I've made all the images visible, and I've highlighted them all by clicking shift. And now the final step is here to go to normal and lighten as it comes to getting to the star trails. So once you can press lighten, you click that, and it will begin to merge the layers in a second in a pattern that makes the star trails, I guess you could say.